of a father, father retired yesterday for the Detroit Lions. I know you covered the story, man, so let's dive right into it. Initial thoughts, I'm pretty sure you had some insight that this could potentially happen, but I'll shut up. Tell us what you know.
No, I mean, I was definitely a little bit surprised. Everyone knew Frank Ragnow was, battling health problems for a while. The toe injury that, he first had happened in 2021, and he re-injured it the next year and, played through it. And so, he's had a lot of things that he's played through throughout the years. Torn pec last year. But he did say at the end of the season that he was feeling as healthy as he ever had been at that time of year. And so didn't have any indications this was going to happen. Heard back in March that he wasn't completely happy with his contract. And, frankly, I don't know what role that played in this whole thing here. We had 2 years left and the Lions weren't going to give him a new deal. So, ultimately I think, the reality is that, Frank's played a lot of good football for a long time, made some good money, his body's beat up, he's got a family, and it sounds, by the statement that he put out that, it was just time, and it took some time to think about it, and maybe the whole totality of the offseason, pushed him over the edge, and now he's going to go set off into retirement. I reached out to him, haven't heard back yet, so hopefully, at some point he's willing to talk and share a little bit more of the story. But Lions are looking for a new center, and that guy might be on the roster right now in Graham Glasgow or Tate Ratledge.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. He played some great football, 6 sacks and 5,541 snaps. I think that qualifies. Yeah. Just looking back at last year's draft and this year's draft, do you think they're reflected in the information that they may have had about Frank Ragnow retiring, not retiring? Would they have drafted Ennis Rakestraw still with that second pick? Would they have moved up on Giovanni Manu? This year, do they take a different player in the first round and instead of the second round pick? How does that shape up, or it's still on par?
Yeah, that's a fair question. And, I guess I haven't combed through all the drafts to see who they passed on and who might have been there. And, I know, right, they traded up last year and Graham Barton was on the board, right? He played some center at Duke once upon a time, and they didn't take him. They took Terrion Arnold. And, you can go back. I know people have mentioned to me Cam Jurgens, right, the Eagles center, right? Maybe the Lions start, planning ahead. Look, I think it's easy to look at that, with hindsight and say they could have done this, they should have done that. The reality is the Lions got some good players at the picks that they made. Maybe they, had they had an inkling, maybe they would have prioritized that a little bit more. But, the way they've operated this offseason with the Tate Ratledge pick certainly leads me to believe that they see Tate Ratledge as their center of the future, even if it's not, immediate. In terms of happening this year, that's the position he played when he came in at rookie minicamp. When we saw them last week at OTAs, he was taking first and second team reps at the position during the installation period. So I think the Lions have high hopes for him as a center. It's just whether they can trust that line to a rookie right off the bat this year or not.
Hey, Dave, a couple of things here on the older players, and he's not old by any means. He's 29 years old, but in dog years and offensive lineman years, he's like 80. But it's sad that we have to see him go. But when they kept Graham Glasgow over Zeitler, I kind of had a hunch that, well, they need a guy to play two positions. I mean, Zeitler's not a center. And then they draft Ratledge, and I think they drafted him with the knowledge or the thought, hey, this kid looks like a center. I can make him into a center. But do you think there's any chance that Frank changes his mind and plays one more year, maybe, doesn't play every single down, every single game? That's the first thing I want to know. And the second is, are they just not going to pay any of the veterans anymore, like an Anzalone, anyone that they basically didn't draft?
Yeah, two good questions, and I think we're dealing with a couple different things there. You mentioned the Glasgow, keeping him. Look, March is when you started hearing the rumblings that, Alex wasn't happy with his contract and Frank, wasn't. And, what are the Lions going to do with Graham? Are they going to force him to take a pay cut? And, they ended up paying him his roster bonus after Zeitler left in free agency. Yep. And, obviously he has some position versatility, maybe can be a center now this year if they need him to play that position again. So, I don't know that. The Lions do have a little bit extra money now that Frank is gone. That if they wanted to make good on Alex's contract for a year, they could do that. I get this from all standpoints. When you're talking about Ragnow, you had 2 years left in an injury history, and Alex sort of the same thing, 1 year left, but there's an injury history and he's older, and from the team standpoint, you want to prioritize paying a Jack Campbell maybe, but from a player standpoint, you feel underpaid. So I understand both sides on this, not wanting to lock up long-term money, in a 30-year-old linebacker or 30-year-old center because you have so many other players to pay.
Right.
I don't know that I would go so far as to say that they won't pay any of those guys, but certainly the Lions have indicated to those guys that there was no more money coming at this very minute. So that's I think that's all we know on that standpoint from now, or
Right.
for now, in terms of what it would mean salary cap wise.
Where would you put the Lions' offensive line now in a rank? Because they were top 3, if not top 2. How much does this impact the line?
It does. Look, Ragnow's a really good player. He was second-team All-Pro last year. In fact, I remember talking to him late in the year, and we were talking about some of the All-Pro stuff, and he was saying how much it meant to him at that time because, he had designs on getting a gold jacket and being considered one of the best centers. And so I that's another reason why maybe this, caught me a little bit off guard that he retired so early. Look, and that just brings me back to your last question, Matt, that I didn't totally answer. Do I see him coming back? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. Again, I haven't talked to him. Total speculation. But I think, I take Frank at his word, and this is probably a scenario where he's taken the last couple months of the season to weigh everything, whether it was worth it coming back at the price he was going to get paid. And he just decided he wanted to preserve the rest of what's left for his family.
Right.
So I think that's kind of where I'd leave things with Frank until we hear otherwise from him.
Hey, I see the ESPN's already updated the depth chart. They got Glasgow at center, Mahogany's on the line with the rest of the crew. I don't see Giovanni Manu anywhere. I just want to know, they reach for this guy. And look, I thought he was intriguing. The big 6'7", 350-pound monster. But are they going to be able to use him? Where are they going to use him? And what do you see? Was that a mistake?
Well, it may turn out to be one, but they need him to come around because
Quick.
He was drafted as well. You think about what they were trying to do, right? And you look back at it, like he was supposed to be the guy that would take over for Taylor Decker eventually to save them some of that salary cap room that they might need to pay some of these other guys. And obviously now, Decker is here and he played pretty well last year again, and he's still got time on his contract. And Ragnow was the guy that was gone that maybe they should have, with the benefit of hindsight, been looking to draft a replacement on early. So I don't know that we're going to see much of Manu. Look, they still have Penei Sewell and Taylor Decker, and so the earliest that we're going to see Manu, barring injury, would be 2026, and at that point he's only got 2 years left on his deal. So, does it turn out to be a waste of a pick? Maybe, but it's far too early to write him off. I think the Lions are still hopeful that they can get something out of Gio Manu, and internally they have talked about how much he's progressed from last year. So he's definitely taken strides, even if we haven't been able to see it on the field because we're not watching him play or practice every day.
Dave, how much credit does Jared Goff deserve for this offense over the last 4 years? I think we're so caught up into Ben Johnson or Benedict Arnold, as many people here dub him, him leaving, and Ben's gone. This guy's gone. This person's gone. Now Frank Ragnow. As Pete made a great point yesterday. You're talking about the first person that Jared Goff touches the football will be Frank Ragnow to Jared Goff to insert. You lose that sense of familiarity, that sense of cohesion. I forgot the question I was asking. In that, I got caught up giving Pete some credit over there. But just, with Frank Ragnow. But how much credit for Jared?
Yeah, no, look, Jared's had 2.5 really good years, with the Lions. Since midway through that 2022 season, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And no matter what role Ben Johnson played in that or Frank Ragnow played in that or the offensive line, we shouldn't, discredit anything that Jared's done, because myself, among others, were people that didn't know what Jared was going to be when he came in. He's been a really good player for this team, and I think he will continue to be a really good player this fall with a new play caller and with a new center snapping up the ball. That said, kind of hit on it earlier, like, it's a big loss. When you lose a Pro Bowl center, when you lose a play caller that, to me, is one of the 3 best play callers in the NFL, along with Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, like, you can't underestimate what that means to a team. So I still like the Lions as a team. I still like their roster. I just think their path to making a Super Bowl, winning the division, all that stuff got harder this offseason by losing 8 assistant coaches, by losing one of the best play callers in the business, and by losing their Pro Bowl center.
Pro Football Focus came out with their NFC roster rankings. Now, we don't play too much to it, but it was interesting. They still had the Lions ranked number 2. This just came out today. They still have them ranked number 2 after the departure of Frank Ragnow. Los Angeles Rams 3rd, Vikings 4, Bucks 5. I'm sure you've seen it already. Looking at this list, just honest. You always are honest with this show, and you're always honest with the city. Are the Lions still, as currently constructed, the number 2 roster in the NFC?
I'd have to think about that. I hadn't seen that list yet. I guess they'd probably have Philadelphia first, right?
Philly 1, Lions 2, Rams 3.
Yeah, I think that's probably about right. I mean, look, the Lions still have some really good young talent, and especially when it's young, like, it should be ascending, right? Jahmyr Gibbs, he's going to be better than he was last year if he stays healthy. Jamison Williams, he's going to be better than he was if he stays healthy, right? Like, Hutchinson is back. If Terrion Arnold takes a step forward, they have some high-end pieces on both sides of the ball. Look, I think a lot of team success in the NFL, though, is built on that offensive line and how good that offensive line is, and that's really been the driver. It's been the engine for a lot of what the Lions have done. So, that's going to hurt the Lions, and maybe they're not quite as good offensively as they have been. But, when you're the highest scoring offense in the NFL, you got a little room on the downside there where you can still be a pretty good team. So, yeah, I think that's probably about right, that whether it's first or second or third or fourth, like, the Lions are still in that upper echelon of talent when it comes to teams in the NFC.
Yesterday when Frank announced the news, Dave, I started looking at the earlier schedule. What does that earlier schedule look like? No Frank Ragnow, no Kevin Zeitler on that right side anymore. What is the early schedule like? And when you look at it, it's the Packers, it's the Bears, it's the Ravens, it's the Browns, it's the Bengals, it's the Chiefs, it's the Bucks.
Wow.
All dynamic defensive lines. But I'm looking at that. That may be a good thing for the Detroit Lions, having to see all that firepower on the defensive line early. I think it gives these guys in-game experience, and I think they look to get better towards the end of the year, which last time I checked, that's when it really counts.
No, you're right about that. That's always what you want to do, right? Be playing your best football, be an ascending team late in the year. Yeah. The problem is if you give up too much earlier in the year, where does that leave you? What kind of hole are you clawing back from? And again, I think the Lions are still a really good team. I still think they're going to be in the playoff mix at the end of the day. But you're right. You've got essentially 2 rookies probably starting in the middle of your offensive line, and Tate Ratledge and Christian Mahogany as it stands right now, at least, right? And Graham Glasgow being the other one, and maybe they add another vet. But there's the Packers. That's been a really good defensive line, and one that's given the Lions fits the last couple of years. Now you're going to open the season with them, at Lambeau Field. So I think the Lions, that again, I wouldn't understate that loss, because Frank did so much on that offensive line, and Graham. If I'm projecting ahead right now, I would probably guess that Graham Glasgow would be the starter, just for the security blanket that he provides at center, and maybe Tate Ratledge plays guard right off the bat. But the Lions are certainly giving Ratledge a long look right now to see if he can do it, if he can be the guy from the jump.
Hey, Dave Anson here. I want you to talk to the Lions fans, because no Ben, no AG,
Lions
no
fan.
trade for Myles Garrett, no first-round edge draft pick, and now no Ragnow. But I still see this team right now as being better than the team that entered the playoffs. The same team that everybody in Detroit thought was a shoo-in to be Super Bowl champion. Is this team better than the team that went into the playoffs last year? And are Lions fans losing their mind righteously, or should everybody just be a little more patient and have a little more faith in this new look Lions team, courtesy of Dan and Brad?
Well, I don't think they're better right now than they were last year. I mean, that was a team that won 15 games
fact.
last year, and you don't have your center anymore, and you lost a guard that played really, really good football, and even if they get some help back defensively, I do think there's going to be a little bit of a drop off, but I still think they're a good team, and so no, I don't think anyone should be jumping off bridges and the Lions run is over after 2 really good years, and we gotta rebuild or whatever. That's not. Look, they're still a good team. They're still going to win a lot of football games this year. It might take them some time to find their footing, but as Bray said, the most important thing is that you're playing really good football at the end of the year, and so I think there's an arrow up for this year's Lions team that if they can gel a little bit early, if they can find some answers at some of those spots on the offensive line where we're talking there maybe are some questions right now that when it really matters in November, December, January, that maybe they can be playing some really good football by then.
Hey, Dave, I know you got to run, pick up your son. I'm glad, by the way, he has not been suspended, and he's finishing his high school career on top.
He's safe now.
Hey, man, he's doing a great job. You're a great dad. Happy Father's Day to begin. Last thing from me, Broderick Martin, I didn't get to mention him. Is he like a forgotten guy? And why the hell did they let Kevin Zeitler go? I mean, how much money was he going to make anyway?
Yeah, I don't know. The Zeitler thing was, he's got some family down in Tennessee too, and I know I don't know exactly what the difference was in money. I think Tennessee, offered him a little bit more, but the Lions had a price that they were going to get to, and hey, look, they, I don't think losing Zeitler is just like death blow to the team, and it certainly wasn't, when he left in March, but it's just one of those little drops in the bucket when you add it with losing Ragnow and you add it with losing Ben Johnson and, you add it with some of the health questions still on defense, right? Aleem McNeil's going to miss 6 or 8 weeks. That, that adds to sort of some of the questions about the Lions. So, look, there's still, there's plenty of good going on with the Lions right now, and it may not, feel that way when you lose a Pro Bowl center a little bit unexpectedly here at the late spring, but this is still a good team and it's still a good roster, and Brad Holmes has shown us he's been able to draft before, and so I'm anxious to see what Mahogany and Ratledge and some of these young guys that he's drafted look like when they get on the field and when pads come on in the summer.
Here, Dave, let's end on a good note. It seems like it's great news that DJ Reed is in camp. It seems like he's also dialing into Terry and Arnold. He's dialing into the secondary. It seems like he's gelling. And the best news, and I'll let you comment on this one. Come on, man. Big Aiden, the progress, being ahead of schedule. That's got to be a bonus to make some Lions fans feel better.
Hey, he looked pretty good when we were out there last week, and no pads, and everyone says that. But, Dan made the point that, he's bending. He's looking like he did in the past, and there's no reason to believe that, he won't return to form after, his rehab is all said and done and when he gets on the field. So you're absolutely right. Aiden Hutchinson was – one of the, 4, 5, 6 best defensive ends in football before he got hurt. I would expect he's going to be back in that same mix this fall. And if he is, that Lions defense, as long as he can stay healthy, that Lions defense should be pretty good. So don't fret too much about what's happening with the Lions. They're still a really good team. And, I still expect him to be in the playoff mix at the end of the day.
One of the best beat writers in the country. We're just happy that he works here in our city for our team. He is Dave Burkett. He's with the Free Press, man. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Dave.
No problem, guys. We'll see you.
See you, buddy.
I appreciate you. Dave Burkett. Always fun when we end up talking to him, but he's absolutely right. And I think that's the thing that we keep the dial into. Anson, I know you're always on top of the situation as it relates to the Lions are a damn good team as currently constructed. And I knew what you meant in terms of you believe they're better now. It's because of the injuries.
I think he was comparing week 1 to this week 1.
I knew exactly what you meant.
Yeah,
I knew exactly what you meant. But, Maz, after talking to DB, do you feel a little bit better?
No. Not at all.
Yeah,
we've lost Zeitler, and now we've lost Ragnow. No, I don't feel better. I don't.
I appreciate having him on because it's the realism, and that's what we're trying to get you to hear on this show. At least for me, when everybody else's opinion is their own. But these are major losses when you start to stack them on top of each other. Now, they will be better in time. And I actually went back, Maz, and I know I scared the hell out of everybody when I was talking about the opening season and the games you play, and you look at those defensive lines. when I look back at the conversation, that's where you develop the experience. That's where you get the in-game experience. That's what you know what it means to fight in the trenches. Remember Panay Sewell when they played the Rams the first time?
Oh God,
like
sure.
that was the birth of Panay because
when
of
he stood up to Aaron Donald.
100%.
Oh my God.
In those moments is when you can grow fast in this game, and I think that was a moment for Panay. Tate Rowledge, Christian Mahogany, Graham Glasgow, they're going to have a lot of moments early on in the season, Anson, to grow up fast because it is a 17-game season now. You know, that adds a little bit.
Yeah, the youth and chemistry will be on full display by the end of the season. They'll be fine in the playoffs. And, yes, I will double down to the soft Chicago fans in the chat right now. It will be a favor to this Detroit Lions team that we didn't cling to an injured Ragnow in a year that he didn't want to play, and we give these young guys an opportunity to gel as an offensive line.